He came to the gym to distract himself from his thoughts. But a chance glance from the coach changed everything. A love that was not meant to be becomes a challenge for society and for themselves. Are they ready to fight for the right to be themselves, even if everyone is against them? I never thought a gym could feel so quiet, so empty, yet so heavy with possibility. I had gone there the way I always did. Earphones in, a towel slung over my shoulder, try to lose myself in the repetition of weight against muscle, the dull burn that made me forget about everything else. At 20 years old, I wasn't sure who I was or where I was going. College classes blurred together, nights dragged on, and the loneliness that gnawed at me never seemed to loosen its grip. That evening, though, the air inside the gym felt different. The hum of machines and the occasional thud of weights were the only sounds. Fewer people had shown up. Maybe everyone else had plans. Maybe they were already out living lives I couldn't even picture myself in. I told myself it didn't matter. I liked the emptiness. It gave me space to breathe, to push my limits without an audience. But that was before I noticed him. At first, it was nothing unusual. A trainer talking with someone near the treadmills. His voice carried easily across the room, low and steady, but confident. I caught myself glancing over, and for some reason my eyes stayed there longer than I expected. He wasn't one of those trainers who strutted around like the whole gym was his stage. No, he moved differently, focused, controlled, like every step had a purpose. He must have been in his mid-30s. The kind of age where you could see experience written not only in the lines of his face, but in the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to know exactly who he was. His hair was dark, but touched with just enough gray to give him an edge. Not the weakness of age, but the strength of time lived. His posture alone radiated authority, though he didn't have to raise his voice to command attention. When our eyes met for the first time, I felt something shift inside me, as if a switch had been flipped without my permission. I tried to look away, to return to the barbell in front of me, but it was too late. The spark of recognition had already happened. There was no smile, no words spoken across the distance, just a look. A look that lasted a fraction too long. A look that made me forget how to breathe for a second. I bent down, adjusted the weight plates, anything to keep my hands busy, to keep my thoughts from running wild. Still, I felt him there, even when he wasn't looking. My pulse beat faster, and I told myself it was from the workout. But I knew better. Every time I changed stations, he seemed to be nearby. Not hovering, not watching in an obvious way, but present. Talking with another member, adjusting equipment, making a quick note on his clipboard. Yet somehow, our paths crossed again and again. Too often to be a coincidence, though I couldn't be sure. It was unbearable in the best possible way. I kept stealing glances. The line of his jaw when he tilted his head. The concentration in his eyes when he checked someone's posture. The way his hands, strong, certain, demonstrated movements as though he had done them 1,000 times and would do them 1,000 more. I told myself it was stupid, that he was just doing his job. But the air between us felt charged, as if invisible wires had strung themselves across the room, tying me to him no matter how far I moved. At one point, I was pushing through another set, sweat dripping down my forehead, my chest heaving. I happened to glance up, and there he was again, watching. Not openly, not with a stare that would draw suspicion, but just enough for me to notice. His eyes caught mine in the mirror, and for a single, stretched-out second, we held each other's gaze. There was no expression, no obvious intent, but the weight of it landed hard. My grip tightened on the bar, my pulse stumbled, and I looked away, pretending to adjust my stance. But it was too late again. Something had passed between us. Something quiet but undeniable. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. He was a trainer. It was normal for him to look around, to check on people. I was imagining things. I had to be. But each time he was near, the air thickened, and my chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and nerves I couldn't shake. I took longer breaks than I needed, wiping down equipment that was already spotless, pretending to scroll through my phone just so I wouldn't have to leave. Because leaving meant losing the chance to see if it would happen again, that flicker of attention, that almost connection. There was a moment near the free weights when he walked past me, clipboard in hand, and I swear his shoulder brushed just close enough to make my skin prickle. He didn't look at me, not directly, but I felt the tension coil tighter, like a rope pulled just short of snapping. The strangest part was how ordinary everything looked from the outside. To anyone else, it was just a man training, a trainer doing his rounds, a gym like any other. But from where I stood, every second stretched thin with unspoken possibilities. By the time I finished my last set, the gym had grown even quieter. A couple of people remained scattered across the room, but most had already left. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder now, the clang of weights sharper, each sound cutting through the silence like a reminder that I was still here, still breathing in this strange tension that had filled the air between us. I grabbed my towel, slung it around my shoulders, and tried to focus on cooling down. But my eyes kept drifting, uninvited, back to him. He was at the other end of the room, demonstrating a movement for someone, his hands guiding theirs carefully, his voice steady but patient. I watched longer than I should have, and when he glanced up unexpectedly, our eyes collided once more. My chest tightened, my stomach turned over, and I had to look away, forcing myself to breathe. In that instant, though, I knew he had felt it too. The pause, the flicker, the unspoken acknowledgement that something had passed between us. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious, but it was real. And it terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. Because here I was, just a 20-year-old student with no idea who I was or what I wanted from life. And there he was, a man who seemed so sure of himself, so unshaken, someone who carried the weight of confidence in every step. We were from different worlds, yet in that silent moment in the gym, it felt like those worlds had collided. I left that night unsettled, restless, carrying with me the image of him, the trainer whose gaze had caught mine and refused to let go. I told myself it meant nothing, that I'd forget about it in the morning. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because once you notice someone like that, really notice them, there's no going back. I told myself the glances at the gym would fade, that what I had felt in those first moments was nothing more than the tricks of a tired mind. But the days that followed proved me wrong. Each time I returned to train, I found my eyes searching for him before I had even stretched. And each time, there he was, Ethan, the trainer whose presence had quietly unsettled everything I thought I knew about myself. At first, our exchanges were ordinary. A nod when I walked past, a brief word about the weights, a polite correction in my form when I pushed myself too far. Yet even in those small interactions, I felt the pull of something I couldn't name. His voice carried a steadiness I lacked, a calm authority that could silence the chaos of my thoughts. It was as if, by simply standing beside me, he gave me permission to believe I wasn't as lost as I feared. One evening, after I had finished a long session, I sat on the edge of a bench, towel draped across my shoulders, catching my breath. He came over, casual but deliberate, and asked how the training was going. I mumbled something about being exhausted, about never knowing if I was doing things right. He studied me for a moment, not just my posture or my technique, but me, the person beneath the sweat and tired words. Then he said, "You're doing better than you think. You've got more in you than you realize." It should have been an ordinary bit of encouragement, the sort of thing trainers say to every member to keep them motivated. But the way he said it, calm, certain, almost like he already knew me, landed differently. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tightness in my chest ease. His words settled there, not as noise, but as a weight of belief I hadn't known I needed. That night marked the beginning of longer conversations. They started as brief exchanges after workouts, then stretched into 10, 15 minutes as the gym emptied. We talked about exercises at first, but soon the subjects drifted. He asked about college, about my classes, about what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't have answers, not really, but he listened without judgment. Where others dismiss my uncertainty as weakness, he treated it as if it were natural, something to be worked through rather than hidden. And in return, I learned pieces of him too. He didn't share much, never more than he intended, but even fragments felt like confessions. He had been in this line of work for years, guiding people, pushing them. But beneath that, there was a hint of something unspoken, of disappointments he never named, of battles fought quietly. The way his eyes sometimes lingered on the floor between sentences told me there were stories he wasn't ready to tell, stories I longed to hear if he would let me. The more we spoke, the more the silence around us seemed to sharpen. I noticed how the hum of the gym faded whenever he was near, how even the clatter of weights seemed to pause. I told myself it was all in my head, but the tension was too consistent, too insistent to be coincidence. There were moments when I caught myself leaning in too close, lowering my voice as though sharing secrets meant only for him. Moments when his gaze lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary, and I felt heat rush through me not from the workout, but from something else, something dangerous and exhilarating. And always, just before the air grew too heavy, one of us would shift, clear our throat, glance away, and the fragile balance would reset. But never reset fully. The ground beneath us changed with every conversation, pulling us closer whether we admitted it or not. I remember one night in particular. The gym was almost empty, the echo of a treadmill in the corner the only sound. I had stayed later than usual, lost in the rhythm of lifting until exhaustion blurred everything else. Ethan appeared at my side, checking my form, steadying the bar when I nearly lost grip. His hands brushed mine for the briefest second, professional, practical, but the jolt that shot through me was anything but ordinary. He didn't flinch, didn't let his expression change, but I felt the tension coil between us, as if we were both pretending that nothing had happened while knowing perfectly well that it had. Afterward, when I sat on the bench rubbing sweat from my forehead, he asked, "Why do you push yourself so hard?" The question caught me off guard. I laughed it off, saying I wanted results, that I didn't want to be weak. But he only watched me, his eyes steady, and said, "It's not weakness you're afraid of. It's being seen." The words landed heavier than the weights I had just lifted. I wanted to argue, to deflect, but I couldn't. Because he was right. I had been hiding for as long as I could remember, hiding my uncertainty, my loneliness, the parts of myself I wasn't ready for the world to know. And somehow, this man I barely knew had seen straight through it. From then on, I couldn't look at him the same way. He had stepped past the surface, and in doing so, he had unsettled the fragile walls I'd built. Our conversations stretched even further after that. Some nights, they lasted until the staff flicked the lights to signal closing. We stood near the front desk, neither of us making a move to leave, caught in a strange space where time felt suspended. We didn't talk about anything extraordinary, music, books, the strange quirks of the people who came and went through the gym doors. But beneath every word was the hum of something unspoken. And it was that silence, more than the words themselves, that held me captive. There were times I wanted to ask outright what he was thinking when his eyes lingered on me in those quiet moments. But the fear of breaking it, of shattering the delicate tension with clumsy words, kept me still. It was easier to let it unfold slowly, dangerously, as if we were both testing how far the line could stretch before it snapped. I told myself again and again that he was just being kind, that I was imagining the undercurrent in his voice, the subtle shift in his tone when he spoke only to me. But deep down, I knew the truth. Friendships didn't feel like this. Encouragement didn't thrum in the air with this much weight. Something more was happening, whether we admitted it or not. And that was the problem. The more it grew, the harder it became to hide. Every word carried an echo. Every silence was charged, and every look felt like a question neither of us dared answer. The nights I left the gym after talking to him, the city outside felt different. The streets were the same, the air just as cold, but I carried something with me, a restless energy that refused to let me sleep. I replayed his words, his gestures, the tilt of his head when he listened, the flicker in his eyes when I said something that struck deeper than expected. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure, because I knew this was no longer just about a trainer and a student, no longer about sets and reps, about advice and encouragement. This was about something fragile, something forbidden, something that could not be explained away if the wrong person noticed. But the truth was undeniable. Between us, in every glance, in every word stretched longer than it needed to be, something more than friendship had begun. And no matter how much we tried to bury it beneath casual talk and professional boundaries, it pulsed in the silence, inescapable and electric, waiting for the moment when neither of us could ignore it any longer. I had grown used to those nights when the gym emptied, when Ethan and I found ourselves standing by the door long after the last weights had been racked, speaking in low voices as though the walls themselves might carry our words to the wrong ears. It felt safe there, in the quiet corners, in the pauses between his sentences, in the glances that lingered just long enough to make my chest tighten. For a while, it was enough. Enough to have his presence. Enough to know he saw me in ways no one else did. But safety is a fragile thing. And secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of slipping through cracks. It happened on a night that seemed ordinary. We had finished our workouts and, as usual, ended up leaving the gym at the same time. The city streets were cool, the lamps spilling pale circles of light across the pavement. We walked side by side, not touching, not daring to close the small distance between us, but I could feel the invisible tether, the pull that had grown stronger with every conversation. We didn't say much, just the kind of idle remarks that meant nothing and everything at once. I remember laughing at something small, something only the two of us found amusing. That laughter, innocent as it was, became the crack that let everything else in. Someone saw us. I don't know who. A student from campus, perhaps, or one of the regulars from the gym. Maybe it was just a stranger whose eyes lingered too long. Whoever it was, they carried away more than a glance. They carried away a story, a suggestion, a rumor. And by morning, that rumor had found a voice. The first sign came in the cafeteria, whispers behind my back, laughter that died the moment I turned, the sudden hush when I walked past a table of classmates. At first I thought it was paranoia, my own guilt painting shadows where there were none. But then came the looks, the sideways glances, the smirks that needed no words. By the end of the day, I heard it clearly, spoken not to me, but loud enough for me to hear. Did you see him with that trainer? Figures. The words burned hotter than I expected. Not because they said anything explicit, just the insinuation, the weight of suggestion was enough. I wanted to shout that nothing had happened, that they didn't know what they were talking about. But the truth was worse. They were right, not in what they claimed, but in what they sensed. There was something between us, something I had no defense against, something that could not be explained away with casual denial. By the end of that week, the whispers had become a chorus. My classmates looked at me differently, as though I had been marked. The friends I thought I could rely on pulled back, their smiles thinner, their conversations shorter. They didn't confront me directly. They didn't need to. Their silence said enough. The loneliness I had fought to escape by going to the gym now stalked me across campus, heavier than ever. And it wasn't just me. Word had reached the gym as well. I saw it in the way people watched Ethan, in the too long glances exchanged when he corrected my form, in the way conversations hushed when he walked into the room. At first, he brushed it off, telling me not to worry, telling me that people always talked. But I could see the strain in the set of his jaw, in the way his usual calm seemed tighter, more controlled, like he was holding something back. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. One evening, after I'd finished a grueling set, he pulled me aside. His expression was unreadable, his eyes darker than usual, his voice quiet but edged with something sharp. "We need to be careful," he said. I asked what he meant, though I already knew. "They're talking," he admitted. "The manager asked me questions this morning. My family's been calling too. They heard something, and now they won't let it go." He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "This isn't just about me and you anymore. It's spreading." The words hit like a blow. I wanted to argue, to tell him it didn't matter what people thought. But the truth was clear in his eyes. It did matter. It mattered to his job, to his reputation, to the carefully built life he had lived long before I stumbled into it. And the weight of that reality pressed down until I couldn't breathe. After that night, things began to change. Our conversations grew shorter, the silences heavier. He no longer lingered with me after closing time. He avoided walking out beside me, found reasons to stay behind or to leave earlier. When we did talk, his words were clipped, professional, as though he was building walls brick by brick in front of me. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was temporary, that once the rumors faded, we would return to the way things had been. But the distance between us widened, and with every inch, the hope inside me frayed. The cruelest part was that he never said outright. He didn't end things, didn't confess to wanting out. He simply withdrew, step by step, until I was left standing alone, staring at a space where he used to be. And yet, I couldn't hate him for it, because I saw the conflict in his eyes, even as he pulled away. I saw the hesitation in his hands when he corrected my form, the way he caught himself before saying something too personal. He wanted to stay, I knew he did, but the pressure, the stares, the questions, the call from his family was too much. And in the end, he chose silence over risk. For me, the fallout was brutal. On campus, the whispers grew louder, feeding off his absence. Without him beside me, I had no shield, no anchor. My friends drifted further away, some out of discomfort, others out of cowardice. I ate alone more often than not, the stares of others a constant reminder of how quickly a rumor could isolate a person. Nights became the hardest. I lay awake replaying our conversations, searching for signs I had missed, for words I should have said when there was still time. I thought about the encouragement he had once given me, the way he had told me I was stronger than I believed. Now those words felt like a cruel echo, mocking me with a strength I couldn't find. But even in my anger and despair, I couldn't shake the memory of him. I couldn't stop seeing the way his eyes had softened when he listened to me, the way his voice carried a steadiness that had once made me believe I wasn't lost. That memory haunted me, a ghost of something that could have been but never was allowed to be. In the end, betrayal doesn't always come with harsh words or final breaks. Sometimes it comes with silence, with absence, with the slow retreat of someone you thought would stand beside you. And as I sat alone in the gym one night, the machines around me silent, the weight of his absence pressed harder than any barbell ever could. I realized then that what hurt most wasn't the whispers of others or the judgment of classmates. It wasn't even the disappointment in his family or the disapproval of his manager. What cut deepest was the knowledge that he had chosen to step away, to let fear decide in place of us. And as much as I wanted to hate him for it, I couldn't. Because part of me understood. And that understanding, that terrible, hollow sympathy, was the sharpest betrayal of all. There comes a point when silence becomes unbearable, when the weight of hiding is heavier than the judgment of others. For weeks I had walked through campus with my head lowered, feeling the sting of whispers and the coldness of stares. I had let them strip pieces of me away until I barely recognized myself. Ethan's distance had been the final blow, a confirmation of every fear I carried, that if I was truly seen, I would be abandoned. And yet, lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I realized I couldn't keep living this way. If I let fear dictate every choice, then I wasn't really living at all. It began quietly. I spoke up in class when people made jokes that cut too close to home. I refused to laugh along, just to blend in. The first time I did it, my voice shook, my heart hammered in my chest, but I held steady. Their smirks faltered when they realized I wouldn't back down, and that was enough to make me breathe a little easier. Then I started telling the truth. Not to everyone, not all at once, but to the people I thought I could trust. A close friend from high school, a classmate who had always treated me with kindness. I told them about me, about the feelings I'd tried to bury, about the fear that had nearly consumed me, about Ethan, though not in detail. Some reacted with surprise, some with silence, but others offered words I hadn't expected. Respect, support, even admiration for being honest when it cost me so much. Each conversation built a piece of the courage I had thought was lost. And with every truth spoken aloud, I felt lighter, as though the shadows around me had thinned. The rumors on campus didn't vanish, but they began to matter less. What once cut me to the core now felt like background noise, because I wasn't hiding anymore. And once you stop hiding, whispers lose their power. It was harder at the gym. Ethan's absence haunted me more than the stares of strangers ever could. I avoided the times I thought he might be there, afraid of what I would see in his eyes if our paths crossed again. But avoidance only worked for so long. One evening, I walked in determined not to care who was watching, and there he was, standing near the squat rack, clipboard in hand, instructing someone with the same calm steadiness that had once grounded me. For a moment, I froze, torn between turning around and walking out or pretending nothing had happened. But then he looked up, and our eyes met. The rush of emotions that surged through me was almost unbearable. Hurt, longing, anger, but beneath it all, a thread of something I couldn't deny. I looked away first, gripping the strap of my bag so tightly my knuckles whitened. He didn't approach me that night, and I didn't give him the chance. But the encounter left me shaken. Because as much as I had told myself I was moving forward, the truth was simple. Part of me still ached for him. Part of me still wanted what we had never allowed ourselves to claim. In the days that followed, I pushed harder, both in the gym and outside it. I spoke more openly, stood taller, let myself be seen without apology. The more I leaned into who I was, the more I realized how much I'd been holding back, how much life I had wasted waiting for permission to exist. The world didn't collapse. Yes, there were those who judged, who whispered, who sneered. But there were also those who stood beside me, quietly, without fanfare. And that was enough. What I didn't know was that Ethan had been watching. It was a late evening when he finally approached. The gym was quieter than usual, the hum of machines fading as people trickled out. I was finishing my last set when I sensed him near, the way I always had before. My pulse quickened, my chest tightened, and when I racked the weights and turned, he was standing there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, his voice lower than usual, "I've been meaning to talk to you." I almost laughed at the understatement. Weeks of silence, of distance, of him pulling away while I tried to survive the fallout. And now he wanted to talk. But there was no mockery in his eyes, only something heavier, something that looked a lot like regret. I made a mistake, he admitted. When people started talking, when my family started asking questions, I panicked. I thought I could control it by stepping back, by pretending there was nothing between us. But all I did was prove them right, that I was too afraid to stand by what mattered. He paused, swallowing hard. And in the process, I lost you. His words hung in the air like weights suspended on a bar, heavy enough to crush me if I let them. I wanted to believe him, wanted to take those words and stitch them into the wounds his absence had left. But the anger inside me wasn't ready to vanish. "You think you could just come back now?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "After leaving me to deal with everything on my own? After watching me get torn apart and saying nothing?" He didn't flinch, though I saw the guilt flicker across his face. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I can't keep pretending. Every day without you made it clearer. I wasn't protecting anything by walking away. I was just hiding, and I can't hide anymore." I stared at him, torn between the memory of his betrayal and the undeniable truth in his voice now. There was no easy answer, no way to erase the pain he had caused. But as I looked at him, I realized something. He wasn't asking me to forget. He was asking me to let him try again, to let him stand where he hadn't before. For the first time, the power wasn't in his hands. It was in mine, and I felt stronger than I ever had, because I had survived the whispers, the stares, the loneliness. I had survived his absence. I had learned to live without fear. And now, if I chose to let him back in, it wouldn't be out of desperation. It would be on my terms, with my head held high. That night, I didn't give him an answer. I told him I needed time, and I meant it. But as I walked away, I felt something shift inside me. The boy who had once been afraid of being seen was gone. In his place stood someone who had found his voice, his dignity, his strength. And if Ethan truly wanted to be part of my life, he would have to meet me there. Not in the shadows, not in silence, but in the open where nothing could be hidden anymore.